Now we're going to start Chapter 3, Organizational Structure and Culture. We're going to talk about how do you set up the project organization. Again, this could have gone at the end or at the beginning. Part of the reason having the book at the beginning is sometimes this affects how you set up your program when you are starting out. So let's look at some of the different organization types that are out there, and then eventually we'll get into discussing organizational cultures. So project management structures. You need to pick a structure for your project. And first I'm going to go over the structures, and then we'll talk about maybe how you might pick a structure. Projects are unique short-term events, so how do we use this multidisciplinary team across that project that we're doing, and what's the best one to go do there? So let's look at them. The first, we're going to go over 4. The first 3 are really the key ones. So the first one's called functional organizations. So what does functional mean? So if you get out in the business world, functions are marketing, engineering, manufacturing, procurement, or supply chain, depending how your company calls it. These are different functions in your organization. Those functions can run projects. So if it's an engineering project, engineering can run it. If it's a manufacturing upgrade project, maybe manufacturing can work it, and so forth. So you could have functional organizations running projects. Usually they're very specific projects, like I say, though, to that organization. I'm not going to have engineering necessarily run a project in manufacturing. It can help out, but they're not necessarily going to run it. So it depends on how you're set up. But one of the key types is functional organizations. These all have some pros and cons to them, and we'll go over those. In my particular area, if I broke up, this picture had engineering broken up into electronics, software, mechanical, and design. One way of doing it. When I had engineering, I broke it up into these 6. I had systems engineering, integration and test. If you remember the system V, it's kind of the upper left-hand corner of the V, upper right-hand corner of the V for integration and test. We had electrical, mechanical, software, and product support. This kind of had my logistics, reliability, safety, and so forth. Each of those organizations would have, most cases, a sub-organization. So systems might have systems engineering, requirements definition, and so forth. Simulations might have signal processing. GNC is guidance, navigation, and control. It might have sub organizations, and in fact most of these would have some types of sub-organizations. Each of your engineering and manufacturing and so forth are going to be a little different, but go in and understand the way they're set up, but there'll be some similarity between them. So, organizing projects in a functional organization, we have different segments of the project are delegated to respective functional units. So, depending on my project, I might delegate certain parts of that to these areas. Obviously, if the product had electrical, they're going to design the electrical. I need to mount the board somewhere. Engineering, mechanical is going to help me with that. Somebody's writing the software on the board. So, different parts maybe delegated to those different groups. But the functional is in charge of that. Let's look at some of the pros and cons, or advantages, disadvantages. So the nice thing with this is I don't need any structural change. I can just work this in my organization the way it is. Because it's in my organization, I have pretty much complete flexibility of how I balance those people and move things around. I could argue where it's an engineering project, we're the experts, so we have the expertise. Easy post-project transition. What does this mean? So once the project's over, assuming it's an engineering-based project, it's going to be pretty easy to transition it to engineering. I mean, we are engineering. If I was manufacturing and had a manufacturing project, pretty easy to transition it. It also has an advantage of each of these organizations has one boss. So if you're on a project in electrical, whatever, you're working for your boss in electrical. You're going to see that's not true in some of the other organizations. So some advantages. What are some of the disadvantages? Lack of focus. So if it's a major project, is it getting focus in the functional organization because I don't have a specific project program and project function pushing for it? So could it lack some focus and get lost in the organization? Maybe, maybe not, depending on your organization. Poor integration. So if this does have to be integrated across the different functions, supply chain, manufacturing, and so forth eventually. Maybe engineering's the lead because it's more engineering, but it's still got, is that integration going to happen? It can be a little slower because now we're not focused enough, and who really has the ownership. Now these two here, I can argue it depends on the project. If it's really truly an engineering project and I had the ownership, well then I don't lack that ownership and I can adjust the speed how I want it. If this is a major project that does go across all the organizations, is it achieving the right priorities across the organization? So these last two somewhat depend on that project. Let's look at the second function, or second type, is called dedicated project team or projectized. So now you might still have your manufacturing, engineering, manufacturing, procurement, but now you have a project manager for every project in your organization. So each project would have a manager, and he would have, or she would have, a dedicated team underneath them. And that dedicated team would be focused on that project. These functions now would be more support and more designing processes and things like that. Let's go a little bit more detailed here. So here might be, again, marketing, human resources, some of those things that go across the organization. But now let's say I have an alpha project and a beta project. I'm going to put engineering on alpha, I'm going to put engineering on beta. They're going to be dedicated to that project. Same with manufacturing, procurement, and so forth. Dedicated people on those projects. Okay? So if I did have an engineering function up here, I might be just trying to design things that could be used across projects or some processes or things like that. The day-to-day engineers are dedicated to the projects. So, organizing project teams operate as separate units under that project manager. Projects, this is very good in smaller organization where projects are the dominant form of that business. And the functional departments are pretty much just providing support to those projectized teams. So let's look at some of the advantages and disadvantages here. This is pretty simple and straightforward. Every team project has its team. That's nice. It's fast because that project manager has control of that team, and it's built of cross-functional people, and it's going to do exactly what he or she wants to be done on that project. It's usually very cohesive. People feel a sense of belonging to the project, so they're very dedicated to that project. You have a nice cross-functional team, and again, you have one boss. Your project manager is the boss. What's the disadvantages? This can get expensive because now I have different project teams, and they all have an engineering team. They all have, so now I'm setting up, in a way, I'm almost setting up a bunch of little companies in the big company. There might be some internal strife or competition across those organizations. I think you can manage this one. Limited technological expertise. What does that mean? I'm project A, what do we call it? Alpha. I'm Alpha. I have an expert in something. Am I going to let that expert go and help out project B or Alpha or Beta? Maybe not. I've got that expert. I want them on my team. Difficult post-project transition. If this is really going to end up going to the factory later or to another unit or something, since we're all tight and we've been cohesive, that's nice, but do the other organizations that are going to get the project understand it? Potential different methods of how to. I should have probably put how to in quotes. What do I mean by this? Alpha projects get somebody designing electronics. Beta projects get somebody designing electronics. They could be designing totally different. What's making them design the same, the how-to? Nobody, because they're separate teams. Like I say, you can almost think of them as separate companies. So you're losing some of the benefits of maybe doing things common across projects. And then what happens to an employee as the project ends? Remember, this is almost like it's its own little company. So the project's ending, they have to go find out if Beta project, Gamma, whoever needs people, and it's almost like they're going out trying to find a new job out there when there's these dedicated teams. So let's look at the last structure. Well, again, I'll talk a fourth, but you're going to see it's really, we'll get there. But this is the last major structure, matrix structure. Hybrid organizational structure overlaid on the normal structure. It'll be easier to see when I show you the picture. You are going to have two chains of command here, though, because the employees are going to report to both functional and the project managers. I'll show you that. But it does optimize the use of resources, so it allows participation on multiple projects while performing normal duties, greater integration across projects. Okay, let's look at it. So here is engineering, manufacturing, marketing, and so forth. And maybe in this particular drawing, this is close to what I had, but you've got design engineering, call that systems. You had electronics, software, mechanical, and I called it product support, technical documentation. Each of those organizations has their team under them. Project A, B, C, and so forth now come and get people loaned in from these functionals to their project. But they're not necessarily dedicated. Many cases they are, but they don't have to be. So let's say I have one expert in electronics, in my case, high-powered microwave. I'm not going to dedicate them to one project. I'm going to share that person across the projects as needed. So he or she is not locked up in one project. I can share that. All my electronics engineers will use the same tools and processes because I'm managing those electronics tools across project A, B, and C. So now they can go from any project A, B, or C and know that they're doing the same tools and the same processes. So I have benefits of reuse and so forth. Okay, and that's the same with all these organizations. I just making an example there. So now each of these organizations loaning people in, sharing experts across the organization. Here, breaking out my organization a little bit different. So systems engineering, I broke it down into those four groups. Let's just take guidance, navigation, and control. Okay, I have certain programs within the company, maybe missile defense, Army, Navy, Air Force. I might still try to group my people under GNC into people who know more about navigation and control for space, where there's no atmosphere, different than doing navigation and control from land targets. And in my case, you're usually launching from a gunner or a tank, might be different than guidance, navigation, and control from launching from an aircraft. So I might break it up a little bit finer within the organization, but now I still have a group of people, let's say in space, that I'm sharing across space programs, group of people in the land here sharing across Army, Navy programs, so forth. So I have some breakdown. It doesn't mean we're not breaking it down a little deeper internally. Now, in some cases, though, this is nice because I can break this down. In some cases, you may not have enough experts to break it down, and that may be because they don't exist, or really you just don't need that many. So cryogenics, for example. Okay, it's very important to the world I was in, but I didn't have a huge cryogenics organization because it's still a limited small part. So that group might just be there, and they're supporting Army, Navy, Air Force, space. They're supporting everything because it's just too small a group to break up. Maybe the same thing on transmitters and receivers for the radar world. Too small a group doing that. But I still have a tight-knit group that can share among themselves and use the same processes and tools and loan out to each of those organizations. So your organization may depend on how things are and the talent that's needed. Again, take some time to understand that in the organization you're in. Okay, so let's look at some of this. Who does what, though? Because now you're going to go, well, who's got what? So project manager defines what has to be done. This is what I need to do for the project. Now look at the functional manager, how it will be done. So project manager says I need a circuit board with a computer on it so that it can control whatever. Okay, the functional manager will say how that's going to be done. Why is that? Because again, he or she can reuse things from previous programs and tell this project manager, hey, we can redo this, do that, use this, do that. So they're going to define how it will be done, what will be done. Usually they're negotiating who will do the task. Project manager, if you're the project manager, you're always going to ask for the senior guy, right? Over here, though, functional manager, you may say that senior person is not available, I'm going to do this person, but I'll give you part-time of the senior person to help out this person or whatever. So now you've got a little negotiation in there. Project manager is going to usually define when it should be done. You're going to negotiate where it should be done. What do I mean by that? So you're the project manager. You're located in building X. You want everybody with you in building X. I'm the functional manager. I only have 3 cryogenics people. I can't put them in building X with you. They're staying with me. They're going to come over and help you when you need help. So now you're negotiating where the task will be done. How much money is available? Type of thing is the project manager. How well has the total project been done? Things like that. So you're going to have some things you negotiate, some things that are strictly functional, some are strictly project. There's 3 types of these matrix organizations that you'll hear. You'll hear the weak form, the balanced form, and the strong. Let's look at the difference, and I have a picture on the next page to kind of show it to you too. The authority of the functional manager predominates. So typical organizations with few projects, the functional manager kind of has this, call it the major control and say The project manager is kind of the interface with the customer. Take the other extreme, and then we'll go to the middle. The strong form, the project manager has pretty strong control. Functional departments are really just loaning people out, don't have a whole lot of say or control. Okay, that's called a strong form, kind of two ends of the spectrum. Generally speaking, what you're looking for is a balanced form where the project manager sets the plan, functional manager determines how it's going to be done, and how those resources are going to be shared. But you'll see organizations go through these swings. Sometimes, honestly, it depends on the people and where the organization's at. I've been through the full spectrum. And so here it is, like I say, here's just showing it pictorially. Weak is more functional dominated, strong is more project dominated. Can we achieve a balance where project and functional kind of have a nice balance in getting the project done? But that's where you'll hear these three types of matrix forms. So let's look at the pros and cons for this. Advantages, this becomes very efficient. Has a nice strong project focus still. People are assigned to a project and feel dedicated to that. Easier post-project transition because now functional has a buy-in and on that. And the one I like is consistent how-to across programs. I put the how-to in quotes here. So from program to program, we're doing software the same. From program to program, we're doing electronics, we're doing those the same across programs. So that makes it easy for me to move people from one program to another. They don't have to relearn the tools when they're moving. Another advantage I didn't put here, I probably should have listed, is when this project is over, those people don't have to go find a new program. I'm the functional manager. I'm just going to assign them to another program. So they don't have to worry about that. They have a home base that's always thinking ahead on where's their next project going to be. Disadvantages, though, it could be some conflict and infighting. Why? Again, you're the project manager now and you want the senior person, and I'm saying you can't have the senior person. I need to share the senior person, and things like that. So it can be a little bit more contentious up there, because you as a project manager would love to have them dedicated. I'm saying no, I can't dedicate him or her. I have to share them. So it can be a little bit more stressful, but it can still help out and work. Two bosses. Now, every employee has their functional boss and they have their project boss. So now you're kind of serving two masters, and that can get stressful for you as an employee. And if you're usually as a junior employee, I might put you on one project dedicated for a while because you might have trouble bouncing between different projects. Generally speaking, as you move up in the organization, I may very well shift you across different projects. So now not even two bosses. Let's say you're sharing your time on 3 or 4 programs, and I'm your functional boss. Now you've got a bunch of bosses out there. How do you satisfy all those? But as a senior person, usually you can handle that, and that's what becomes more and more expected, and honestly, I think more fun. I get to bounce around to different programs and help them out. So where can this be contentious? Well, coordinating multiple bosses could be an issue. Salary and bonus review, who does it? So again, look at your organization. They're all going to be different, but here might be a flow. So the functional does an evaluation and ranking of you as an employee. The project does an evaluation and ranking. And then we might get together and merge and reconcile. And why do I say that? You're the project manager. You've got somebody working part-time for you. You might not rank them as high because they're part-time. I think they're really valuable because they are part-time, and I can move them across different programs and help multiple programs. So I might have a different view. So now we've got to reconcile and work that. And then you'll usually get together and maybe do a final rating and ranking. Okay, so now, who conducts your performance review? Again, look at your organization, but usually in the matrix, the functional is going to conduct the performance review. So each year I'll do a performance review. Now, if you were just working one program, I might have that project or program manager in on the review, and then I would kick them out at the end, and then I would talk to you about what do you want to do next. Because that has nothing to do with that project manager. What are you looking at for the future? Because I'm worried about your future too as the functional manager. Project manager's worried about their project. But at first, we might both be in that room evaluating your performance for the last year. Now, again, depending on the organization, who's going to do the raise and the bonus? Maybe as a functional manager, I'm doing the raise. Maybe the project's doing bonuses. Maybe different says, how does your organization do that? And they get together, but generally speaking, they're going to review that together. So I'll review all the increases with that with that project manager, and then do the salary review. So it does add some complexity on this review process of marching that through. But it can work, and it can be very good benefit. So generally speaking, the larger organizations are going to be matrix-based. Smaller startups and things, you're probably going to be project-based. So composites, the fourth one I was telling you, there's four. You don't see this very often, but again, this is PMP does talk about this. So may use a combination of those types. So it might change depending on the projects and things within the organization. So they might have a composite of projectized and functional depending. So maybe a small startup might have several new projectized programs, and then maybe they still have some functional looking to get some new work and different things. So you might hear of composite. Not generally prevalent out there, but it is one of the other ones in that batch.